listening to Season 7 of the podcast, Belonging to Blackness. I'm your host, Dr. Yndia. Happy spring! Welcome back to another episode of Belonging to Blackness. I'm your host, Dr. Yndia. As with each episode, we explore Black identity, purpose, culture, and joy. Today, we are in conversation with Stephanie Browne, founder of Sipping Sense and host of the Sips and Swigs podcast. Stephanie is a global wine traveler, author, and cultural connector who celebrates Black life through food, wine, and storytelling. In addition, Stephanie's work bridges hospitality and leadership, utilizing her 30 years of corporate leadership, including her tenure as Vice President of Talent Acquisition and Chief Diversity Officer at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, where she helped reimagine inclusive leadership at the highest levels. Stephanie is also the CEO of Talent Management Consulting Services, where she advises organizations on DEI strategy, talent acquisition, HR technology, and organizational transformation. Stephanie's wine journey spans the US and across continents, from Spain and France to South Africa, Argentina, Australia, and beyond. As the founder of Divas, Uncorked, Stephanie helped define and legitimize a multicultural female wine consumer segment, collaborating with major wine brands and reshaping how the industry understands Black women as tastemakers and buyers. That work was featured in Women of the Vine and led to historic milestones, including becoming the first Enophiles and the only second group of women to keynote the prestigious Nederburg auction in South Africa. Divas Uncorked also advised global spirits leader Distel that led to the launch of Divas Uncorked Chardonnay, one of the first nationally distributed Black women-led wine labels, introduced live on The Today Show. Stephanie is an active member of the Association of African American Vintners and collaborates with wine and spirits producers committed to reaching multicultural audiences with authenticity and intention. She continues to shape modern wine culture through her new book, Sipping Sense, Uncorking the Flavors of Wine, Entertaining and Healthy Cooking, and through her newsletter, Sips and Swigs, and all the spaces she creates for connection, learning, and joy. So whether in the boardroom or the tasting room, Stephanie's work reminds us that belonging can be built one conversation, one table, and one shared experience at a time. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Yndia. That was a wonderful overview of, seems like my whole life at this point. Yeah, thank you so much. You make me sound really good.
Well, you're fantastic, and I'm so happy that audiences will get to learn more about you and your journey. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Wonderful. So let's get into it.
Give Black Alliance is proud to support the podcast Belonging to Blackness, hosted by Yndia Lord Wilmot. The podcast is an exploration of all aspects of our Black communities, including gifts of time, talent, and treasure, while shedding a positive light on the African descendant experience globally. The Give Black Alliance informs, reforms, and transforms philanthropy to acknowledge and partner with our communities in order to bring about equitable change for all. To learn more about Give Black Alliance, visit us at giveblackalliance.org.
Act 1, Call to Adventure. So, Stephanie, I've always remarked that much of what inspires us and gives us purpose is autobiographically rooted. So, technically, you were born in Monterey, California, but you grew up in Columbus, Ohio. So you're really a Midwest girl at heart. And you've remarked that much of your influences around food, entertaining, and community stem from your family, especially your grandmother, your mother, and your aunt Sis. So, what early experiences shaped your relationship to food, gathering, and storytelling?
Growing up, I really had a chance to see what entertaining looked like through family entertaining. My grandmother was, I call, the ultimate host. Every Sunday after church, we would go by her house as she got older and wasn't able to go to church. And she always had some goodie for us, whether it was pound cake, whether it was homemade rolls, or just a simple coffee cake. There was always something there once we got there. And it was always presented in a way that you would think we were going to a sit down dinner because she loved pretty things and she was a seamstress. So she would create doilies and tablecloths and napkins. And so just everything always felt prepared and ready for pictures. If you had iPhones back in that time, you would be taking a picture of it. And then it was always a gathering to talk about what happened that week. The children couldn't like go off and run off and go someplace else to have fun. She always wanted to have a conversation. So it was always an engaging experience. It only lasted about an hour, but it was enough to know that connections really mattered. And then fast forward me into young adulthood, my aunt was the ultimate entertainer as well. And she lived in New York, so it was fast. You know, when you went to see her in New York, it was all her girlfriends and they were having a good time. You know, I can remember Lynx back then, Carrots back then in the 70s and the 80s. So it was kind of like I had these two bookends and then my mom in between. And my mom had a bridge club. And it's kind of what I fashioned Divas after. She had this bridge club that met once a month. All the good china came out, the silverware came out, and the spirits came out. And I used to listen to them having so much fun while they were playing bridge and, you know, having this wonderful lunch and the like. And I just thought, wow, that's how girlfriends are supposed to be. If you think about all three of those, the two bookends and then my mom in between, who I, you know, obviously was with all the time, that's what made me feel as though I was prepared for entertaining and prepared for understanding how friendships and connections really, really do matter.
It seems like you've had so many beautiful experiences around learning, well, how does one gather? How does one form community? How does one engage in sisterhood? And even more importantly, it doesn't have to be drab. It could be fabulous and deserving. We deserve to be in beautiful things and surrounded by beautiful things and to taste beautiful things. And so why not have that as also part of the shared experience? That's beautiful.
It felt beautiful. And, you know, I don't know that I actually really valued it or understood what it did to me until later in life. When you're just experiencing, sometimes you just think that's just how it's supposed to be. It doesn't always come to the front of your mind around what I experienced. How did that make me turn out later on in life? It was a legacy that I love, really was the impetus around the book.
So I get the familial connection, but then when I think about the fact that you've spent over 3 decades in corporate leadership, right? So a very different kind of space to traverse. And you've held some fantastic leadership positions, including being vice president of talent acquisition and chief diversity officer through Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And then now even the CEO of your own talent management consulting services. I'm thinking about this question around how in many ways you've bridged strategy, particularly that's necessary in corporate spaces, but with this notion around humanity, how does one relate to other people? So what did you learn about people and about yourself when you were building these inclusive systems inside of these kinds of institutions or bureaucracies? Many of these spaces aren't designed with us in mind. So when you think about just how do you traverse those kinds of spaces, what did you learn about people and then even of yourself?
You know, that's a really complex question My career was very diverse. I really started out in technology back in mid 80s. There were no people that looked like me at all. I mean, I was really just about always the only female and the only person of color in the room.
Wow.
Thank goodness for the upbringing I just talked about, because so much of executive and leadership relationship building are done in social settings. And sometimes back then, even more than now, because they've pulled back a lot of money that you can spend on social settings in corporate America. So thank God I had some of those experiences that I talked about around being around nice things, navigating eating experiences, being proud of my lived experience helped me really navigate then. I was always trying to find kind of like that mutual thing me and my other peers in the room had in common. And the lived experiences are what are most not thought about for people who look like you and I.
Mm.
When you think about culture, culture comes different ways. It could be race, things that shape you. It could be culture from your heritage, whether you're from America or not. It could be whether you live in the South, the Midwest, the East, or the West. It's different. And so all of those things shape who you are. And I had to really think about what I respected around that from everyone who was around me. Fast forward into the work that I did in diversity, equity, inclusion, it was the same thing. You just need to be very conscious of where people are and where they have come from so that you can understand how to build that journey.
Mm-hmm.
Because the goal of the journey is to get everybody to respect the person that's sitting across from them and understand where they are, why they are where they are, and how you bridge the gaps and bridge the connections.
The synergies that we actually have in common with other people, that's the bridge. Those are the connections that we're making. It's the social, it's the food, it's the, well, what did you do this weekend? Or those sorts of things that people get to see. Well, we're actually far more similar than we are different.
Yes, and so now growing up, wine was not in the picture. Spirits were, the majority of the beverage of choice when it came to alcohol growing up. I can only remember one time in my aunt's house where my uncle had a big bottle of Gallo Burgundy that sat on the floor by the buffet when it came to wine. So wine became something that I became interested in long after many of those experiences.
Mm.
Growing up in corporate on those technology trips and things like that, wine was introduced. And so back then I was drinking white Zinfandel. That was the wine that, most women drank back then. It did at least give me an entree into filling up. I belonged at the table. Over time, all the things that you talked about in my bio have come to fruition. But food and dining were always part of those scenarios. And so that gave us an opportunity as colleagues to sit down and talk across the table and travel. I was in technology, and so I was traveling the country on business trips long before a lot of other folks were doing that. And so I got a chance to see a lot of parts of the United States because I worked for a national company. But then also I was making enough money that my family could travel.
Mm.
There's where, you started to think about, okay, how do you start to experience culture outside the United States? And what does that feel like? And outside the United States, I'm always looking for the Black community. I'm always looking for what the Black community contributed to the culture and the food. And that has really expanded how I think about the world, how I think about people, because a lot of what we learn in the United States about other parts of the world is that they're rural, they're backward, they're not sophisticated. And that is so far from the truth every place that I've been.
There's so many people that actually have never left their country of birth. And that's not even for those here in the United States. I've spoken to other folks who live abroad in, granted, most idyllic places that you can think of, but they will say, I've never left. Once you get to leave, you're exposed to counter narratives of what you've already been receiving about these different places. And then you learn about power, you learn about place, in addition to understanding cultures. I appreciate that for you, those experiences have really helped to deepen your understanding about wine and then entertaining writ large.
I think the other piece that's really shaped me is the respect for those communities
Mm,
and not taking my preconceived notions to them. Also, learning the cultures enough to know how to show up
mm,
in other cultures. And sometimes it's very contradictory to how we do in the United States. Because of that, sometimes my husband will have to say, well, this is a predominantly male culture. They're going to serve the male first. And, there's like all these other rules that happen in other parts of the world that sometimes may feel offensive to you. How do you respect that and make sure that you're taking away from that experience all the good stuff? It's a lot of learning and it takes a lot of patience sometimes when you're traveling. Most of the time you're on vacation, you just want things to be moving fast. If you sit back and just take it all in, it becomes very enlightening and beneficial.
Talk to us a bit about Divas Uncorked. So it began as a gathering among friends and grew into, dare I say, even a movement that shifted how the wine industry understood Black women. Divas Uncorked became the first Black enophiles and only the second group of women to keynote the Nederburg auction in South Africa. And then how you advised Distill, which led to the creation of Divas Uncorked Chardonnay, right? So, what did it mean to be explicit about identifying Black women as a wine consumer segment? Those moments probably meant so much to you, not just personally, but then historically.
Divas what we call a hobby gone amok. It just happened, honestly. We were gathering together as girlfriends, right around 9/11. Community, friendships, caring about each other. Everybody was talking about it. It wasn't just our little group getting together. Because we were actually really trying to learn about wine, we were spending a lot of time and energy and money in stores
Mm,
because every month someone was hosting. And the premise of each hosting, you had to have education. There were just so many things you needed to do manually to figure out what you were going to give as an education for the rest of the divas. And so we were spending a lot of time in wine stores, and I'm going to call them package stores, liquor stores, because there really weren't many wine stores existing back then. And they were all male run. There weren't any women in them. They were used to talking to guys. We didn't get much TikTok when we went in stores, when we were trying to find wines to serve. That led the women in the group, who were all A type, well, why? Why are women not being paid attention to? Why are Black women or Black people not being paid attention to in this industry? And the industry was going through a shift back then. They were having a challenge with consumers. Collectors couldn't buy all the wine that they wanted to produce. And so they were also looking at how to change how they approached marketing
mm.
to increase their customer base. And if you did the research back then, women always bought all of the goods for entertaining, whether their husbands were entertaining or they were entertaining for themselves. Women were the biggest buyers. And so there was just a natural connection between women being the biggest buyers and that being the industry people should be paying attention to. And then you add on top of that people of color. So we were thinking about that anyway when we were creating our events and approaching people to host us during the time where we're just a club.
Hmm. I mean, then that means that there was already a presumed narrative about Black consumers writ large, right? But it's oftentimes perhaps hard spirits and especially the brown liquor. Like I would say the framing of wine has always been high culture in comparison, whereas brown liquor is kind of round brown kind of thing.
Which is how we end up getting to South Africa, because it was the same in South Africa. South Africans drank spirits. Their wine industry wasn't even white at the time. Their industry was spirits based, and women definitely drank spirits because Blacks in South Africa were given, I call the gut wine, the stuff that really wasn't any good. They didn't drink it. And so the industry over there, Distill, was trying to figure out, how do I connect with the women in our country, get them to know that these wines are good wines and not the wines that they may have experienced through culture. How we actually got noticed was an article that was written in Newsweek, ironically by a sports writer. The owner of Legal Seafood had a friend that came to his restaurant all the time who loved wine, who connected him to Divas. And we invited him to one of our monthly outings. And he wrote an article in Newsweek about wine because he was a known-a-file. That article is the article that got noticed in California because we talked a lot about the industry and women and wine and people of color not being a target market. Two of us were invited out to talk to the industry, and that's how the Chardonnay came about, from someone we met there. There was all these things that just kept happening that created Divas to become more of a household name and become the wine club that everybody started to think about. People will talk about Divas today. It was like we were the mother of wine clubs. You know, there weren't women wine clubs back then. Kind of snowballed. And here we are today, where people would look at you crazy if you thought that women weren't the huge consumers of wine. The Today Show came about through Colette Phillips out of Boston. She had a connection. She told them about us, and they invited us onto the show. Another connection, another friendship from a club, 100 Black women. Again, the power of connections really matter. One thing led to another, led to another, led to another, and now I'm 25 years in to a wine career, all at the same time having a corporate career, literally side by side.
And when you reflect, at least on the wine career, I mean, there aren't that many organizations and entities that have had this sort of wonderful success and notoriety. And I think in many ways, that's why you all stood out for a very long time and continue to do so when people are like, oh, remember Divas Uncorked?
We were ahead of our time, and we had examples. B. Smith was an example. It's a huge example for us from the standpoint of fine dining, beautiful things, connections. How do you bring brown culture, the Black culture from America to the forefront and have it be wonderful and engaging? She was my Martha Stewart. And then we had Martha, and that was during Martha's heyday. There were plenty of examples during that time. There's Ina Gardner that came a little bit later for me. So there are plenty of examples during that time that gave me the idea that we kind of fell on something that might actually be valuable. The strategic brains of the women of Divas was just amazing. We had way more ideas than we could even possibly execute on. But we tried. I think opening my store was the one thing that actually gave me personal legitimacy. That was something that I had to do all by myself from scratch. And opening those doors that first day, looking at what I had created, and customers walking in, the vendors walking in, they legitimized me as a person in the industry. And I remember walking through Hess Collection Vineyard in California and going, wow, I would love to live like this. Because it was just so beautiful. The vineyards, the flowers, the tasting room, everything just popped for me as luxury, finery. And I love to try to help people create that on a budget. You could do all kinds of things when it comes to fine dining or entertaining, home design, and even food can be very expensive if you use certain ingredients and things like that. So I try to figure out how I can have people feel all of that and not hurt their pocketbook too much.
I have to share something that's genuinely changed my sleep. I love my Cozy Earth bamboo sheets. They're unbelievably soft, breathable, and feel like luxury every single night. Treat yourself by using my 21% off discount code, which is belong to black, at cozyearth.com. And know that we earn a commission when you use our code. So when you buy, you're also supporting the podcast. Find my discount code in the episode description and get luxurious sleep your body will appreciate. I know mine does. Act 2, The Road.
All right, Stephanie. So this is the part of the show that I love asking all of my guests this same question and curious to hear your response. And the question is, how do you play?
Restaurant hopping. I would say travel and restaurant hopping. I love food and dining, and probably a little bit of art in the middle. And when I say art, it could be music art, or it could be a museum, an exhibit at some place that really talks about culture, and not necessarily always Black culture, but I probably gravitate towards Black culture when it comes to going to museums and music. I love R&B, I love jazz. I try to find communities where I can do that. I love fine dining. Love finding new restaurants, going out with a girlfriend or my family, and then critiquing them. And because I really love to cook, I think I'm pretty good at it. I'm always comparing it to like, I could have made that at home way better. Or I find ways to make it at home and put my own little twist on it so that it's a new dish and not the same old dish. And so those are the experiences that really mold me.
Mm.
Was in Paris and went to see Paris Noir, which was an exhibit of all the Black artists that came through France. And that was just an amazing education and learning about all the different artists' names I've never heard of before, their stories around how they shaped the movement from a Black perspective. We spent 4 hours in the exhibit, and I don't think I've ever spent 4 hours in a museum all at one time, and didn't really realize until, we were actually getting ready to leave. I'm like, well, we've been here a long time. But it was just so moving because you could see the artists that left America and did their thing outside. You could see the African artists and the Haitian artists. It was just an amazing experience. So those kinds of experiences are what gets me excited.
I love that. It's based on creativity. These different mediums are communicating something about care and humanity, right? Food and wine also do that as well. Tell us the impetus for Sipping Sense. And at least from a business model perspective, how is it similar and or different from, say, Divas Uncorked?
Well, there's probably some similarities from the standpoint of, I talked about learning a lot about entertaining from growing up, but I also learned about entertaining from the women of Divas Uncorked because they were all amazing entertainers. Kind of the themed approach to dining and entertaining really came from Divas. So it's a homage to the legacy of my family, but it's also a thank you to all the women of Divas Uncorked that helped mold me into who I am today around wine, entertaining. So Sipping Sense is all about experiences. It's a company that is designed to bring experiences to its member or the network or the consumer in a way that you are able to connect, learn about wine, learn about food, and hopefully create them for yourself down the road. It's a learning journey that I like to take people on. There's travel. You can go with me on an excursion, learn about a culture, connect with other people, learn about wine and food. You can listen to my podcast and listen to other folks who are in the industry who are doing either the same thing I'm doing or they have their own journey that they're on from a business perspective. I talk to winemakers, I talk to retail folks, I talk to people in the industry helping both of those, the trials and the tribulations of the industry and all the good stuff within the industry. And then there's the newsletter that I put out every month, giving you a recipe. I'm talking about the podcast. I'm giving you some education around how you grow your own palate and how you do things better for yourself as it relates to experiencing wine and food and people. from a connected perspective. And then there are the events that I do, and those too are experiences and the like. I'm also releasing a new program called Hospitality Intelligence, The Power of Connections. And this is a way to introduce folks to the essential social and cultural competencies that will help them define their professional confidence and their credibility when it comes to dining. Because I don't know if people really realize that all of our relationship building from a business perspective happens in social settings. Dinners, receptions, and travel. Those settings are where you want to really show up well. And there are some expectations as you navigate the career ladder or you're an entrepreneur doing business development. There's some expectations around how you host, how you respond as a guest, and then, how do you network? How do you leverage those networking opportunities to build relationships or build business? So that hospitality intelligence is really important.
When I think about even in corporate settings, as you were speaking, indeed, if we're trying to find ways to connect, sure, when we're going on interviews, there are folks that marginally could do the job, but there's a focus on fit. And how do they discern fit? Well, do we get along? Is there synergy we have? And sometimes businesses will try to suss that out in these social settings. So you might have the technical expertise, but if you don't have the social skills, the people skills, the EQ, as we're oftentimes referring to that, because you didn't know which fork to use at what time and where to place your napkin, or even when they ask a question around, what kind of wine would you like? I love the fact that part of your business model is this overarching education as well as experiential, as well as fun.
Ironically, etiquette is something that has been taken out of our learning journey over time. Growing up, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, there were always etiquette classes. You kind of went to finishing school. A lot of it's been taken out of society learning, and you dine enough with other people, you can see where it's very much missing. Social conversation and being able to engage in conversation, I think the phones have taken a lot of that away. So how do you, show up at a table and actually talk? And be curious about the other person sitting at the other side of the table, especially if it's someone that you're going to work with, you hope for a long time. You want to know a little bit about them so that as you're engaging with them in doing work, you can tap on that culture or tap on those competencies or tap on their upbringing to know how they're going to interact with you around the work. And now, because we have cultures from all around the world sitting at the table, we need to be thinking about that as well, especially when it comes to the type of food you might prepare or recommend if you're hosting, the table manners themselves. How do you show up at the table? Picking wines. What are the things you need to understand about different parts of the world around wine? You don't have to be an expert, but you do have to know how to talk to the wine director or the sommelier that's at the restaurant. It's a skill just like the skills you need to do the job. My goal with hospitality intelligence, start them on the journey or meet them where they are and continue to expand their skill set in this space. And on top of that, I'm going to learn something from people who I'm working with or interacting with. And if we're doing a salon together with others, then people are learning from each other. It expands our circles. And so relationships continue to build, and you continue to fill your coffers with knowledge that you'll be able to call out later on.
Well, you're like my very own B. Smith, right? You're a beautiful lady, and she was a model and a restaurateur and an entrepreneur and all the things. Hearing you describe Sipping Sense as a business model and the menu of options and levels of engagement that you are curating for folks. But then on top of that, your book. And for folks, the title of Stephanie's book is Sipping Sense: Uncorking the Flavors of Wine, Entertaining, and Healthy Cooking. It blends recipes, wine pairings, and you've also included personal narrative. And the book is a beautiful book, and there were certain things about wine that even for myself as a wine drinker, a person who enjoys wine, I don't present myself as this person who's all knowing, but I know a little something, something. And even still in reading the book, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, these are great tips. So share with us, why did you write the book? What was the message?
So I wanted it to be a lifestyle book because I didn't want to be kind of pigeonholed into this is a cookbook. And I wanted it to be something that talked about the legacy and my journey around wine and my legacy and journey around entertaining. So that's kind of why I kind of tried to infuse the stories in front of every chapter. And I wanted it to be a guide, whether you're a novice or someone who knows a lot about wine. I wanted you to be able to get something out of the book. I talked about the beauty of entertaining, presentation of food, presentation of table needs to be pretty and not necessarily pretty from a female perspective, but inviting no matter who you are as a guest. I wanted to give people some tips around how you can do that quickly and inexpensively, and at the same time have stories behind it. Talk a lot about heirlooms in the book. And so, we all get passed down things. And if we really like modern, then we might not use grandma's old serving dish. Or if we really like things that are historical, we might not use something modern. And I kind of like to say, you can just mix it all up together and have it be pretty. Then there's a story at the table. Why did you use that beautiful covered dish? And you can actually have a conversation about it. I had so many conversations with people about heirlooms from an entertaining experience because they have them too. That was, the reason for thinking about how do you create these little opportunities for people to be able to do things quickly and pretty, entertaining wise, with the sections of the book that are tips for folks. It can be difficult, confusing, and I wanted to try to simplify pairing because pairing to me is very important. One of the biggest pet peeves I have around food and wine when it comes to how you entertain it, because I'm always looking for perfect balanced taste. Sometimes it doesn't matter to people. Some people just love their wine and they're going to drink it no matter what they're eating. They love a specific varietal, that's all they're going to drink. And that's okay too. But for me, pairing matters. That's what gives you that experience that says, I'm going to come back again. And so I wanted to create some kind of a blueprint that would allow people to do that quickly, but also not have it be so complicated that they would shy away from it. So that's where the blueprint in the book comes from. There's a lot in the book, so you can look at it multiple times and pick something up again and again and again and again. I put a lot in there purposefully so that it became more like your kitchen Bible or your entertaining Bible than just a cookbook.
In the book, you talk about your partner and him being a pescatarian and having to really think about cooking. You even shared a story about his non-grilling skills. There are funny moments in the book. They always harkened back to the relevance, right? So, when you're grilling, whether it's vegetables or this or that, and there's sauces that accompany the different meals, well, how do you pair them well with certain kinds of wines? If reds are your jam, then what types of wines flow well? If you're agnostic in terms of reds and whites, how to play? I mean, I think one of the things that I experienced in reading your book, it was also playful. And even if you're a novice, it gives one permission to play with food and have fun and to try it. And you may say, you know what, I love this. Or you may turn around and say, well, you know what, I think I might like this other thing better for next time. It's quite educational, but it allows folks to feel confident in a space where we're not often made to feel confident in these spaces.
Everybody's tastes are different. Your palate actually grows over time if you're curious and you let it grow over time. A lot of our foods growing up from Black culture tend to have a lot of spice. They tend to be very bold and forward on the palate. We tend to like sweet because it's something that we grew up with. We start with sweet wines. And so trying to get people to go from sweet wines to dry wines is, oh my God, it's very difficult getting them to just even try.
Like a Moscato to a Merlot. People are like, what?
No, no. But you can get dry wines that will turn sweet depending on how it's paired from a food perspective. That's why pairing is so important. And then sometimes people who get all the way to dry, they'll never try a sweet wine again. And there are beautiful sweet wines that go with salads and seafood and things like that, that they start out sweet when they go on your palate by themselves, but they balance or turn more dry depending on the food that you're having. So I try to give people, like you said, the license to play. And I also was very intentional about every recipe has a red and a white recommendation,
Right.
because I want to debunk the myth that you need red with this and white with that. And I also sometimes threw in a sweet wine. A port with this?
Right.
At least they'll think about it. They might not try it, but at least they'll think about it. Or if someone else serves it to them, they at least seen it somewhere before that it's possible. The book was really fun to write, especially the stories. There are lots of bloopers. Some of them I put in the book, and there's plenty more bloopers. Maybe there's book two. Who knows?
I think so. For our listeners, and especially for our African descended women who feel called to pivot, to reclaim joy or take up space, what do you want them to know about trust, timing, and claiming their seat at the table?
That's a deep question. Oh, I would say trust your gut. If you've been exposed at all, you kind of already have an idea of what you should be thinking about. Trust what you're thinking, because most of the time, the first thing that comes to your mind is probably the right thing. It's when we think too hard,
Mm.
we end up messing things up. So use your girlfriends. If you're hosting and you don't feel confident, then go to the hostess in your clan that you're like, I love the way she always hosts. And ask the questions. Don't be afraid to copy someone. That's flattery if it's a friend. And when it comes to business and networking, how you're going to develop your company or how you're going to move up the ladder in your career, educate yourself. Find those master classes. They don't have to be long. There's so much out there that you can leverage today. Invest in yourself, because if you don't invest in yourself, you're going to stay stagnant. Based on where we are today, that's not a good thing. That's not acceptable, because there's just so many people trying to knock us off the pedestal.
Mm.
Our culture is really the basis for American culture. And because of that, be proud of it and leverage it and use it.
Act 3, Where We Land. All right, Stephanie, before we go, where can people find you, learn more if there are upcoming events or programs? Please do share.
The best way to find me is through just emailing me. And that is Stephanie at stephaniefbrown.com. So that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And it's Brown with an E, because there's always somebody always leaves off that E. My website is sippingsense.com. And there you can find all the things I'm doing around Sipping Sense. I try to do a trip at least once or twice a year. So those come out on my website. And people are invited to those if they've attended another one of my events. My newsletter is called Sips and Swigs. You can just sign up for that on my website and you'll get it on a monthly basis. I try to release the podcast once a month, and it's on Spotify, Apple, and you can find it on my website. My upcoming event on Martha's Vineyard, I'm doing something called a wine crawl. 3 stops on the island, a winemaker, and a wine pairing with food at each one of the stops. The next one for 2026 is Friday, August 21st. Instagram at Sipping Sense, and I'm on Facebook at Sipping Sense. Meat of all of my work comes out through the newsletter, the podcast, and on my website. And of course, talent consulting. Sipping Sense is part of talent consulting. It's a piece of it, but I also do some HR work there and some one-on-one coaching of executives around talent acquisition, DEI, and change management. So you can find me through my email there as well.
All right, folks, there you have it. So thank you so much, Stephanie Browne of Sipping Sense, for coming on to Belonging to Blackness and to share your journey with us. We're so happy to have had you.
And thank you for having me. And I'm proud of you too.
Oh, thanks.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others and be sure to subscribe. Find us on my website, www.yndialoricwilmot.com. Follow us on IG and Facebook at belongingtoblackness_podcast for the latest fashion and accessories. Visit www.shopbelongingtoblackness.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.